Dark Souls is a series that is unique in today's gaming industry, and not only because of its difficulty that Namco likes to market it with. Dark Souls is hard but fair, and I think more gamers need to know that. These games are designed around rewarding players for taking their time and approaching things carefully, but they're not impossible. So if you've played a Souls game, you already know they are really good, for the most part, but this video is more for those who haven't given the series a chance for whatever reason. If you have tried them and just aren't feeling it, that's fine. No one game is for everyone, but if you haven't, here's why I think Dark Souls is like really good. The first reason I think Dark Souls is really good is because it trusts its players, and this seems to be a trend coming back to gaming in the last few years. As gaming has become more popular, people who are not traditionally seen as gamers have jumped into the market. So for a long time, and somewhat still today, companies felt it was necessary to make games accessible to as many people as possible. But during that time comes along Demon Souls, the predecessor to Dark Souls, saying, nah, we're good making this game hard, we don't need to explain every little thing, and you know what? It worked. Demon Souls gained a cult following, and through word of mouth led to Dark Souls becoming a huge success. So Dark Souls is a game that respects its audience in its design. You never feel like you're being talked down to with some type of companion or something that explains every little thing in the world. This game's feeling of trusting its players and its hard difficulty have led many players to compare Dark Souls to classic games from the NES and SNES era. While Dark Souls actually has many modern elements in its design, the comparison is simply out of respect for our intelligence, like many games from that era understood. I'm constantly reminded of this when talking to NPCs in the game. When you're talking, your character just stands there in front of them and listens to what they have to say. But I'm always careful where my controller is during these moments, because at any second I could accidentally hit the attack button and hit someone, and hitting someone in Dark Souls is no laughing matter.
If you are the chosen one, a revelation shall visit thee. What follows thereafter?
Oh, shit!
Very well.
The first time I ever played Dark Souls, I decided to test out what would happen if I attacked the first NPC in the game, just to see. He quickly killed me and I learned my lesson.
You will soon regret this.
Then the game loaded back up and he was still after me. But you know what? From that point on, I learned that I have a responsibility to this game's world because they trusted me enough to have that power. While this lack of explanations can lead to some aspects of the game feeling confusing, like its covenant system, I think the benefits it provides outweighs the negatives and provides a unique experience to each player depending on what they figure out on their own.
I shall slumber until I am awakened again.
In my first playthrough, I just brute forced my way through the game, not understanding a lot of the game's deeper mechanics. But that was my experience, and that lack of explanation leads to another reason Dark Souls is really good. Now, games in the past have been criticized for not giving the players enough direction on where to go, but for me, that is something I hate in games, especially ones that want me to have an adventure. After the introduction to Dark Souls, you are literally dropped off in a place with 3 different directions to go, 4 if you have a certain item, and nothing in the game tells you one is better than the other than difficulty. On my first playthrough, I went through this graveyard with skeletons, and damn! Kept getting killed by skeletons. They were really hard, but since all I knew about Dark Souls was it was hard, I thought that was the way it was supposed to go, so I kept on fighting them, over and over, trying to get better, and eventually started conquering my enemies. I later found out this was not the smartest way for a beginner to go, but hey, it was the way I went. I discovered this place on my own and made it work. No waypoint had to show me where to go the entire time. A lot of games say you get to explore an expansive world, but then guide you through the world at every step. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't call that real exploration because you're not the one doing it. You are just following a list of things to do until you beat the game. But in Dark Souls, you are given the simplest of tasks. Ring 2 bells. I don't know where they are or how to find them, you just know one is above and one is below, and go. From that point on, you run around fighting your way through enemies and actually exploring this mysterious world. You never know what's around the next corner, so you have to be careful. This exploration had me more immersed in this game than almost any other before it, moving slowly with my shield up around corners and actually using a lantern to see in dark areas.
Ah, shit! Shit.
Because you aren't guided every step of the way, you feel like this is a real place to explore. The level design is really good too, and that seems to be a theme here. The world of Dark Souls features pathways that almost always loop back on themselves, allowing you to have shortcuts to locations that were previously far away. It feels amazing coming across one of these paths, realizing, oh, hey, this is the place I was before. Cool. The world feels like a practical and real place, which also goes a long way in making you feel like you're discovering and exploring. A lot of adventure games can have worlds that feel too overly designed, making them feel more like puzzles just designed for you to go through and not a world with history and lore. Speaking of which brings me to my next reason Dark Souls is really good. So you've made it about halfway through Dark Souls and you're not sure if you can go on any longer. You decide to press on through one last door. That might actually be a man in disguise, but yeah, still a really good game. So seriously, next is... Now, a lot of this game's positives seem to come out of its ambiguity in every aspect, and storytelling is no different. You are, as I said, literally dropped off into this world and then expected to figure it out. But there is actually an interesting reason why the game's story is presented like this. The game's director grew up in Japan, where he would read English fantasy novels for some reason. But since he didn't fully understand English, he had to fill in the gaps beyond his understanding at the time. This feeling of only being given some information in a story is what influenced the very vague story Dark Souls presents. I know some people who see this as a negative, but for me, it is an overwhelming positive. It makes me think of the real world we all live in. Amazing things have happened on this earth over thousands and thousands of years, but we are just a small part of it, living out our own lives, our own stories. In Dark Souls, it's the same way. We are just a small part of a bigger picture that this game's lore presents. Dark Souls has a very simple story, but an amazingly detailed lore, being everything that happened before the player arrived. That was the most interesting part of Dark Souls for me, understanding what happened in the past of this vast world I was exploring. You slowly start to get bits and pieces, finding out about ancient wars, secrets of the gods, changes in the world that then you get to start to influence. You also meet plenty of people throughout your adventure, but while NPCs in other games are used just to explain the world, these people are just like you, exploring a world, not having every answer, looking for answers themselves, much like the player. And figuring out the world is something many people have tried. Next is... As I said, Dark Souls lore is deep, really deep, and only the most dedicated players will even have time to read and remember every piece of information the game tells you through cryptic item descriptions. But some certainly have, and it has actually created a whole subgenre of YouTubers that discuss and give their takes on the story of Dark Souls. I just recently beat the game, but as soon as I did, I went online and discovered so many people telling full-blown stories about the game's lore and putting new perspectives on things I thought I knew from the game.
Above the Cathedral Ward, you come across the orphanage, and connected to that was a research hall that conducted inhumane experiments utilizing arcane, which is now trapped in a nightmare and likely abandoned in the world
of the real.
But Alfred is merely going off of hearsay and doesn't know the darker side of it all.
I don't recommend doing this until you've beaten the game, but once you do, check them out. What makes this a positive for me is this game allows so much interpretation of its story and meanings. It creates dialogue between players. While back in the day, kids would go to school and talk about secrets they found in games like The Legend of Zelda, now they're doing the same thing online, on forums, on YouTube, discovering everything about a game together.
Despite claiming to continue to live by the passage, "Fear the old blood,"
Fear the old blood.
It is very evident he continued the research and use of the old blood and turned into a beast himself.
Everyone has their own adventure, but then joins forces to have an even bigger one online. And speaking of adventure, my final reason Dark Souls is really good is... That's right, everything in this game, from its lack of direction to vague storytelling to sweet racks, comes down to one thing: having an adventure. While many games tell great stories and are lots of fun, this game is special to me because it's my adventure, no one else's. In the game, that's me, figuring out the world around me. The character is literally a hollow shell that needs to be filled with humanity, my humanity. No scriptwriter wrote dialogue for my character or portrayed him in a particular way. I even noticed in the game's very few cutscenes, the character's animations are left pretty vague, not showing fear or any other type of emotions that would have disconnected me from him. In the end, I wasn't given a list of chores I had to finish, or a companion thing to tell me everywhere to go. I went on with an urge to explore, and went on an adventure all of my own. Thank you guys so much for watching. These are the reasons I think Dark Souls is really good, but just because I do doesn't mean others won't find problems with these points. If anything I said piques your interest, I recommend giving the series a try. You just might discover one of your new favorite games. Again, thanks for watching, guys. Leave a comment letting me know why you love Dark Souls or don't like Dark Souls. Either way, I'd like to know. Hit that like button to support the show and subscribe to the channel if you're not. Have a good one, guys, and praise the sun. Ha! Snuck one in.